We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Monday, September 8th here in Seoul. I'm Lee Soo-jin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Park Gi-eun.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Also, Yoon Se-young's with us.
Good morning, everyone.
And both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So it's Monday, which means some of us are starting our work week while others are starting their school week. And there's one item that we can't imagine going without as we head to either our workplace or school, our smartphones. And this is true for adults and students alike. But recently, South Korea passed a bill banning the use of mobile phones and smart devices at schools, set to take effect from the next school year in March 2026. So for today's discussion, we'll be examining this new regulation, what it means for students, parents, and educators. So to start our discussion for today, Kyun, how many hours a day do you typically spend on your phone?
That's a very good question. I never really counted exactly how many hours I spent on my phone on a daily basis, but my smartphone, being very smart, was actually keeping track of it the whole time. So it turns out that my average daily smartphone usage is almost 4 hours, which is like a quarter of the time when I'm awake during the day. It showed me which applications I use the most. Number one being YouTube, second being my navigation, and third being my Kakao Messenger app. Since I drive almost every day and I turn on my navigation because I'm not really good with the directions, I think that accounted for the long hours I spent on my phone. I'm sure many of you, including both of you, spent a lot of time on streaming platforms and also social media, and of course Messenger apps. And apparently many health professionals recommend keeping recreational screen time, like social media, gaming, etc., to under 2 hours a day, while others say 2 to 4 hours of purposeful smartphone use that includes learning and productive tasks is appropriate. So I guess I'm on the appropriate end.
You're doing very well.
I think you are, considering if you're counting also using navigation, it's really not that bad.
And right now, I don't have a smartphone with me. I'm actually charging it outside, and I'm feeling a little anxious, but I'm okay.
What about you, Sam?
Well, honestly, I use my smartphones quite a lot, and I hate to say this, but sometimes I feel that I'm pretty dependent on it. For one thing, I use it to take pictures or videos of my kids, and I also use it for messaging, not just to stay in touch with my family or friends, but so much of my work are connected to it, so I need to check it all the time, sometimes even on weekends. And on top of that, I use it for social media, YouTube, of course, and navigation. And I also do online grocery shopping on my phone. So it's really become inseparable from my daily life. But the tricky part is I don't want my kids to grow up too used to seeing smartphones all the time. So I try to set an example by cutting back on my own usage. But it's really hard, so that's the dilemma I face.
And I feel like not to give ourselves an excuse, not to make excuses. So much of our work is like, and also like you said, grocery shopping is a necessity.
Yes,
it's really to
right.
Then use your laptop.
I know.
That's a good point.
Mommy has a good excuse.
So starting next year, smartphones will be completely banned in schools, and naturally, this has sparked a lot of conversation and debate among students, parents, and educators alike. But before we dive into all of that, can you explain exactly what this new regulation entails, Kyun?
Sure thing. So the new law of banning use of smartphones in schools, otherwise called Elementary and Secondary Education Act, was recently passed in the National Assembly plenary session. So starting from the first semester of next year, which is March, elementary, middle, and high school students will be prohibited from using smartphones and other smart devices during class. However, exceptions are allowed for students who use them as assistive devices due to disabilities or special education needs, or in response to emergency situations. So the types of smart devices restricted for use and possession will be determined by school rules. Plus, the head of the school also needs to ensure that education on proper use of smart devices is incorporated into the school curriculum in accordance with the Education Basic Act.
So smartphones have become such an essential part of our lives that it's hard to imagine going through a day without them, whether it's for work, socializing, or just passing the time. But I'm guessing most teachers already discourage their students from using their phones during class. So how is this new regulation different from what was happening before, Seo?
That's a really good point. In fact, teachers have always tried to discourage their students from using smartphones during the class, but it was not applied to all schools or all classes because until now, schools have been regulating smartphone use on their own. According to a survey by the Gyeonggi Institute of Education, 43% of elementary, middle, and high schools restricted smartphone use through school rules, but more than 30% relied on students to manage their own usage. And looking closer, 32% left it entirely up to students' self-control, while 10% allowed each class to decide for themselves. But with the new decision, a more systematic legal guidelines has been introduced now. And also under the revised law, schools can now restrict the use or even possession of smartphones or other smart devices on campus to protect students' right to learn and teachers' right to teach instead of just relying on autonomy.
But what's the reasoning behind this new school smartphone ban? Like, why do lawmakers or educators feel a need to implement it through a nationwide bill rather than just leaving it up to individual schools to decide their own policies like they did before?
I mean, to start off with, numerous studies have found that early smartphone use leads to various side effects such as reduced attention span, lack of sleep, and even cyberbullying. And according to the Ministry of Gender, Equality and Family, as many as 210,000 adolescents are reported to be experiencing difficulties in daily life due to excessive use of smartphones and the internet. So this gave lawmakers and educators enough reason to raise it to a nationwide bill. Furthermore, lawmaker Jo Jong-hun of the People Power Party, who actually proposed the amendment, explained that the law is a promise to protect the most precious things, which are conversations with friends, small jokes and laughter, and children's concentration and rest time in the classroom. And he added that it's not about taking away smartphones and the human rights, etc., but about returning children's time and lives as students.
That's really important. What was your experience like in school with smartphone devices?
Oh, let's not go there. Back in my day, we didn't have smartphones to begin with. We had these little brick phones, the 2G
Right.
phones, which didn't have many functions at all. So it was just for texting or calling. So what was actually trending back then was MP3 players.
Oh,
I remember this.
Yes,
Yeah.
I used to sneak them into classrooms and put it up my sleeve with the earphones and pretend I'm leaning on the side
That
and
was
just listen to
clever.
music throughout the class. So that was my main source of distraction, not so much the smartphones back in the day when I was young.
If these regulations in place, maybe you can get back and interact with other students as well.
Exactly, yep.
Are there any other reasons for the regulations, Hayo?
Well, this bill is not only about protecting students, but also about protecting teachers. A survey found that about 66% of teachers said they had experienced class disruptions due to students' use of smartphone during the class. And in a recent statement, the Teachers Association in Ulsan explained that the new law provides an institutional safeguard against classroom disruptions, such as unauthorized recordings or photos, as well as other behaviors that undermine teachers' authority. So in the end, the law aims to protect both teachers and students while hopefully creating a more respectful and focused classroom environment.
Right, so concerns about the overuse of smartphones, especially among students, are obviously very valid. But at the same time, some people argue that banning them outright might be too restrictive since phones can also be used for learning, communication, even safety. And that's why this decision hasn't been completely welcomed by everyone. So Kyun, how are young people then reacting to this ban?
So banning the use of smartphones in schools could be taking away the freedom and rights of students and further encourage excessive human rights violation in schools from teachers and educators. But one thing for sure is that students go to school to learn and to be educated. And if the use of smartphones in classrooms actually distracts and hinders their learning, then I think using them should be restricted to a certain extent. And like I said, I remember back in my school days, everyone was allowed to have their smartphones in the classroom. And there were, I guess, like half of the students would actually play with them and get confiscated from the teachers.
Oh.
The other half, the good students, they weren't distracted by the smartphones. They would have them in their pockets, put it on silent mode, and it didn't hinder their learning at all. So the teachers had no problem with the good students. So I'm not trying to separate bad from good students, but I think if the students can actually control their actions and refrain from actually playing with them, I mean, give them the freedom and the leniency. But then if that doesn't work, that's when rules need to be implemented by, I guess, just banning it completely. So I think it's a double-edged sword.
Right. I guess this is where this new regulation comes in. And of course, Hae, you're a parent, so I'm sure this, discussion hits close to home. So what are young parents around you saying about this?
Well, as I mentioned in the opening, I often worry about my kids being drawn into the world of smartphone too quickly and growing overly dependent on them. And my children are only 5 and 2 years old, but they already know how to unlock simple passwords.
Wow, a 2-year-old.
Yes, and how to turn on cameras or start YouTube by themselves. And sometimes it's quite frightening to see how instinctively they know how to manage these smart devices at such a young age. So I can only imagine that once they get older, it will become even harder for me as a parent to set limits. So for that reason, I personally welcome this regulation. I feel it's meaningful that at least in schools now, there will be a stronger legally backed framework that helps protect children's right to learn, and it will help them focus more during the class. And among the parents I know, most of them share the similar view, I believe. And we feel that true freedom is not about being able to use smartphones whenever you want, but it's about being able to focus and enjoy playing with friends and live your school life fully without feeling the constant pull to the screen.
Have you ever thought about when you want to give your kids smartphones?
When they go to elementary school, there's a thing called the kids phone, not smartphone. There's no internet access, but you can still contact your parents, especially in an emergency situation. So yeah, I think it's a pretty good idea.
So I guess that could be like an alternative for people who want options after this ban is in place. But of course, this kind of regulation isn't just happening in Korea. So how are other countries handling smartphone use in schools, Hyun?
It's happening all around the world. France has completely banned the use of smartphones to elementary and middle school students nationwide since 2018. The Netherlands, Italy, Spain, and China also have laws restricting or prohibiting smartphone use in schools, and the list goes on. And according to UNESCO, as of last year, smartphone ban policies were in effect in 79 countries.
That's a lot.
It's a lot of countries.
Do you know of any examples maybe of countries that have even stricter rules in Korea maybe?
Well, another noteworthy example comes from Toyoake City in Japan, where a proposed ordinance suggests limiting smartphone use to 2 hours per day for all residents. And this initiative aims to address concerns over excessive screen time affecting sleep, mental health, and social interactions as well. And the proposal includes recommendations for curfews. Children aged 6 to 12 should avoid screen use after 9 p.m. and middle school students and above after 10 p.m. and that includes adults as well. And while the ordinance is non-binding, of course, and carries no penalties, it has sparked debate among residents, with some supporting these rules, but others raising concerns about practicality and freedom.
Right, I guess students in Korea won't complain about these bans once they hear about this.
10 p.m.
So excessive smartphone use, especially among young people, is an issue seen across the globe. So it's not really surprising that schools in many countries are implementing regulations to manage students' smartphone usage. And to get a better sense of how this is being handled internationally, we're going to hear from someone from a different country about his experience with smartphone rules in schools. And that conversation will take place right after the break, so don't go anywhere.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search our channel Arirang News. Click Community and leave a comment down below. Make a new type of news with us.
We're joined today by Fabio, a Gen Z from Spain. Hi, Fabio. Thank you so much for connecting with us today.
Hi there, good morning. Nice to see you all.
So do schools in Spain also have rules about smartphone use?
Yes, right now most regions and also the Ministry of Education are aligning with the concerns of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which means that banning this type of devices in school is said to improve concentration and also avoid problems like cyberbullying, as you have mentioned. Right now, there is no specific ban taking place, but it is true that for the most part, it is not allowed in educational centers. My father, for example, is a principal of a public institution, a public educational center in Spain. So what I have learned so far is that every single center has their own rules. But for the most part, children that are under 12 are not allowed to carry smartphones unless extremely necessary. And for high schools, from personal experience, I do think that most students usually carry the devices, but if they're not confiscated, they're usually not allowed during class or recess.
Okay, Fabio, so how are people in your country generally viewing smartphone regulations, and what kinds of opinions or debates have you seen arise surrounding this issue?
Well, there's a lot of reservations when it comes to the use of new technologies, a lot of concerns. I think a ban, for example, if you're thinking about it positively, you can provide that kind of like technological detox to students. They can, you're allowing them to live in the moment. But at the same time, I feel like there's also an irrational fear from our generation towards newer generations, because we think that because of our incompetence with new technologies, they might also behave the same way. I do think that we tend to imagine these kids just using TikTok all the time instead of taking notes with the new type of tools. That is kind of the truth. When I was in high school, I used to sneakily use Instagram as a distraction instead of actually, using assisting technology. But at the same time, if the educational center does not provide the possibility of experimenting or discovering that type of assisting technology, it might be quite limiting. So I do think that regulations and having those kind of boundaries are definitely necessary to avoid a lot of problems. But at the same time, we shouldn't only have a reductive type of perspective when it comes to these new technologies.
I see. Then, in your opinion, what would be a wise or effective way to regulate smartphones?
Well, in case we try to avoid a whole ban that might be quite limiting, I do think that implementing it in ways that are definitely, well, I guess, productive would be the nice way. But that also depends on the competence of the educational center. For example, a lot of schools in Spain are providing tablets or computers that have limited internet access, but are up to date with newer technologies. So that could be a perfect system. Or, for example, also allowing students to use smartphones in class for a very specific assignment or a very specific task, but always making sure that every single student is on the same page and using it for a very productive type of purpose. But if you're not allowing that opportunity and you're having students have their smartphone in class, I guess it's counterproductive, because they don't really have the possibility of using it or learning how to use it, and it's going to only become a distraction. So I guess it really depends on whether the center is prepared, has the infrastructure, the devices, or the knowledge for it. If they don't really have that, I do think that setting some boundaries is important. But completely banning it from the whole country and all of the institutions might be a little bit problematic or limiting.
Like you said, I think finding a middle ground will be key. Thank you so much for sharing your insight with us today.
No problem. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we just heard from a young person from Spain about how smartphones are regulated in their schools. It's really interesting to see how both their similarities and differences compared to Korea. And while regulating smartphones in schools can have clear benefits like reducing distractions, improving focus in class, and even protecting students from online risks, there are also concerns about whether such rules might be too restrictive. So based on what we've discussed today, Hae-young, in your opinion, is turning to a legal ban really the right solution? Should something like this be handled through law or left to students' parents and students to manage on their own?
Well, I think a legal framework is necessary. Schools, parents, and students can try to manage smartphone usage on their own, but voluntary measures are not enough. I hate to say this, but it's true. And a nationwide law ensures consistency, so every child gets the same level of protection no matter their school or family situation. And as a parent, knowing there's a clear legal basis helps reinforce healthy habits at home and ensures children's focus and time at schools are respected. And it's not about taking away freedom, I believe, but also creating a structured environment where kids can develop attention, social skills, and healthy routines.
I think these are really good points. What are your thoughts on this, Q?
It will take some time to see any kind of results when this kind of bill is implemented. But I think this move kind of seems to show the law leaning more towards the school and the teachers over students, because by implementing the law, teachers will have greater control of the class and their students. However, we have seen in recent times students and their parents somewhat showing more authority and power than teachers as they were victims of abuse, harassment, and even threats. And this tilted relationship went viral and led to many teachers actually leaving their jobs or not even wanting to pursue teaching as a career at all. And even a few teachers, unfortunately, taking away their own lives from emotional distress from students and the parents of those students. So I think this law, if it helps the school education system and in turn help the children and students in turn in the long run, I think it could be very beneficial, because even as adults, we can't really control not using smartphones.
It's not easy.
Right.
So we have to set an example first. And if we cannot do that, I mean, we should follow rules as well. But I think that's another issue to talk about later.
I agree. So to wrap up our discussion today, Kyun, then what do you think is the best way to regulate smartphone use in schools without going too far or restricting students unnecessarily?
You know, I think students should learn to obey rules as students. And if the use of smartphones is prohibited during class, then simply following can solve the issue very easily. But everything is easier said than done. Maybe perhaps if the teachers show an example, like I just mentioned, first by not using smartphones at all in classrooms, I think students can look at the teachers and think, oh, maybe that's a good option in classrooms. So setting those rules is very important because, like I said, students go to schools not to play with their smartphones, to mingle with their peers, to play with friends in playgrounds, have a good conversation, laugh, and interact with the teachers, not with their smartphones, because once they, graduate into the real world, they'll have plenty of time or plenty of screen time ahead of them. So I think restricting is one of the good options for students in classrooms.
And what are your thoughts on this, Hale?
Yeah, I think the key is also finding a balance. These new legal guidelines will now set the framework, but at the same time, it's also important for schools, teachers, and parents also to work together to help students develop healthy digital habits. And the goal isn't to simply forbid smartphone use, but how to teach how to use them responsibly. In that case, in that sense, clear rules can help create an environment where students can enjoy the benefits of technology without it taking over their daily lives.
So we've explored both the challenges and the opportunities that come with smartphone use in schools, from concerns about distraction and mental health to the potential benefits of technology for learning. And while opinions differ on the best way to regulate phones, one thing is clear: finding a balanced approach that supports students' focus, safety, and growth is key. And as schools, parents, and students continue to navigate this issue, we hope conversations like the one we had today can help contribute towards creating a healthy, productive learning environment. And this brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation, but News Gen will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time. A big thanks to Q.
Thanks for having me.
And also Hale.
Always my pleasure.
And to all our viewers, thank you so much for watching. And we are News
News
Generation.
Generation.